The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the U.S. horizon. Captain Jake Morrison stood looking out at the endless black space, thinking about how quiet things have been lately. His crew of 45 people have been exploring this part of space for 6 months now, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that humans could live on someday. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Betty Cruz from her station. She was young but good at her job, and Jake trusted her completely. "What kind of readings?" Jake walked over to look at her screen. The green dots and lines meant nothing to him, but Betty understood them like reading a book. "Large ships, sir. Really large. I count at least 12 of them, maybe more. They're not moving like any human ships I've ever seen." Betty's voice got a little worried. "And Captain, they're heading straight for us." Jake felt his stomach tighten. In all the years humans had been exploring space, they had never found another intelligent species. There were theories, of course, and hope that somewhere out there were friends waiting to meet them. But these ships didn't feel friendly. "Put on the main screen," Jake ordered. The view screen lit up with an image that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The alien ships were massive, at least 3 times bigger than the horizon. They looked like they were grown rather than built, with smooth curves and a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange patterns glowed along their sides in colors that hurt to look at. "Sir, they're trying to communicate with us," reported Communications Officer Danny Park. His hand shook a little as he worked his controls. "It's coming through on multiple channels at once." "Put it through?" A voice filled the bridge. It was deep and harsh, speaking in perfect English that somehow sounded wrong, like the speaker's mouth wasn't made for human words. "Small creatures of this system, you will surrender your vessel immediately. You will provide us with the location of your home world. You will submit to the authority of the Corvani Empire. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all young, most of them on their first deep space mission. They were explorers, not soldiers. The Horizon had some basic weapons, but nothing that could fight ships this big. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth ship Horizon," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come in peace. We would like to talk and learn about your people. We mean no harm to you or your empire." There was a long silence. Then harsh laughter came through the speakers. "Talk? Learn? You are weak creatures who mistake our generosity for weakness. The Corvani Empire has conquered 47 worlds. Your pathetic species will be the 48th. The alien ships moved closer. Jake could see details now that made his blood run cold. The hulls were covered in weapons that looked both high-tech and somehow alive. Parts of the ships pulsed like they had heartbeats. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildup in their weapon systems," Betty said, her voice barely a whisper. "Evasive maneuvers, all power to shields and engines," Jake ordered, but he knew it was useless. The Horizon was a science ship, not a warship. "Captain Morrison." The alien voice came again, and this time Jake could hear something like amusement in it. "Your fear feeds our instruments. We can smell your weakness across the void, but we are not without mercy. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." "We will not surrender," Jake said, "but we don't want to fight you either. Surely there's room in the galaxy for both our peoples." More laughter. "Room? Little creature, the galaxy belongs to the strong, and we are the strongest who have ever lived. Our warriors wear armor that learns from every attack. No weapon in the galaxy can harm us. We are death itself, walking among the stars." The communication cut off. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Then alarms started blaring. "Incoming missiles," Betty shouted. Jake watched the weapon streak toward them on the screen. The Horizon's automatic defenses shot down most of them, but 3 got through. The ship shook as they hit, and lights flickered all over the bridge. "Damage report. Hull breach on Deck 7. No casualties, but we're leaking atmosphere," reported Engineer Matt Thompson over the intercom. Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump to Earth. Send a message to Earth Defense Command. Tell them we've made contact with a hostile alien species." Tell them they're coming. The horizon jumped to hyperspace just as more alien weapons reached their position. As the stars blurred around them, Jake thought about his younger brother Alex. Alex was a terraforming engineer working on New Austin, one of humanity's newest colonies. It was a peaceful world, full of families and children, and people just trying to build a better life. The trip to Earth took 3 days. When they arrived, Jake was shocked to find the solar system in chaos. Earth defense ships were everywhere, and the space around Earth looked like a military base. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Susan Hayes. We received your message, but we've learned more since then. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, and Jake could see she hadn't slept in days. The aliens didn't wait. While you were traveling, they hit 3 of our colonies, New Austin, Wellington, and Riverside Station. Jake's heart stopped. New Austin? My brother Alex is there. Was there? The Admiral's face went sad. I'm sorry, Jake. There were no survivors. They didn't just attack the military bases. They killed everyone. Men, women, children, everyone. Jake sank into his captain's chair. Around him, his crew was crying. Many of them had friends and family on those colonies too. How? Jake whispered. Their ground forces are unlike anything we've ever seen, the Admiral continued. 8-foot-tall warriors in armor that seems to be alive. Our Marines put up a good fight, but their weapons just bounced off. Plasma rifle, kinetic rounds, even explosives. Nothing worked. The armor adapted to every attack and became immune to it. Jake looked out at the stars again. They didn't look peaceful anymore. Somewhere out there, an empire of killers was coming to destroy everything he loved, and humanity's greatest weapons were useless against them. What do we do now? He asked. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment. We fight, she said finally. We fight, and we hope we can find a way to win before they reach Earth. Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks watched the Marines die through her binoculars. From her command post on the hill, she could see the Corvani warriors walking through the human defensive line, like it wasn't even there. Their dark armor gleamed in the sun of Titan Station, and every step they took brought death. Fall back to secondary positions, she ordered into her radio. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing mattered against these monsters. The Corvani soldiers were 8 feet tall and moved faster than any human could run. Their armor covered them completely, with no visible gaps or weak spots. It wasn't just protection either. Amy watched one of them pick up a 3-ton shipping container and throw it 50 yards like it was a toy. Commander, Jenkins' squad is requesting permission to use the heavy plasma cannons, came a voice over the radio. Negative, Amy replied. We tried that yesterday. The armor just absorbs the energy and gets stronger. She remembered the first time they fought these aliens 2 weeks ago. Sergeant Collins had hit a Corvani warrior with a direct plasma blast that should have melted steel. Instead, the alien had laughed and walked straight through the beam. The next day, plasma weapons didn't even slow them down. Ma'am, what about the nuclear charges? Amy closed her eyes. They'd already tried that too. The explosion had leveled 6 city blocks on New Melbourne, but when the smoke cleared, the Corvani warriors had still been standing. Their armor had adapted to absorb radiation and heat. Negative on nuclear weapons. We can't risk civilian casualties for something that won't work anyway. Dr. Peter Hayes crouched next to her in the command post. He was a scientist, not a soldier, but he'd been studying the aliens since the war started. His hands shook as he looked through his own binoculars. This is impossible, he muttered. Armor that learns and adapts in real time. It violates everything we know about physics and biology. Tell that to my dead Marines, Amy said bitterly. Through her binoculars, she watched a group of her soldiers trying to hold a checkpoint. They were good men and women, veterans of the colonial wars. They set up a crossfire with kinetic rifles and opened up on 2 advancing Corvani warriors. The bullets hit the aliens' armor and bounced off like raindrops. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching the armor change. Where the bullets hit, the surface seemed to ripple and flow like liquid metal. Within seconds, it had hardened into a new pattern that was specifically designed to stop kinetic rounds. The next time someone shot at those warriors, their bullets wouldn't even leave scratches. It's not just armor, Dr. Hayes said suddenly. Look at how it moves, how it flows. I think it's alive. Amy lowered her binoculars and stared at him. What do you mean, alive? I mean it's some kind of organism, maybe symbiotic. The Corvani wear it, but it's not really clothing or equipment. It's more like a second skin that thinks and learns. One of the Marines at the checkpoint screamed over the radio. They're not just killing us. They're enjoying it. I can see them laughing under those helmets. Amy raised her binoculars again. The Marine was right. The Corvani warriors weren't just efficient killers. They were taking their time, playing with the humans like cats with mice. One of them had grabbed a human soldier and was holding him up in the air, slowly crushing his ribs while his friends watched. All units, fall back to the city center, Amy ordered. This position is lost. But falling back wouldn't save them. The Corvani had landed on 12 human worlds in the past month, and not one of them had been successfully defended. The pattern was always the same. The aliens would arrive in their massive ships, land their ground forces, and within hours the world was theirs. "Commander!" came another voice on the radio. This one was calmer, more professional. It was Major Bill White, one of her best officers. "I've got civilians trapped in the medical center. 300 people, including kids. The Corvani are heading straight for them." Amy felt sick. The aliens didn't take prisoners. They didn't spare anyone. Men, women, children, elderly people. It didn't matter. They killed everyone they found. Can you get them out? Can you get them out? Negative. Too many Corvani between us and them. We need a miracle to punch through their lines. Amy looked at Dr. Hayes. Any ideas, Doc? The scientist wiped sweat from his forehead. I've been studying the footage from every battle. There has to be something we're missing. No organism is perfect. Everything has a weakness. Well, find it fast, because at this rate, they'll reach Earth in 2 months. The radio crackled with more bad news. Reports were coming in from across human space. The Corvani fleet was massive, thousands of ships spreading out like a plague. For every world humanity evacuated, the aliens attacked 2 more. "Commander, this is Captain Morrison on the U.S. Defiance," came a familiar voice. Amy smiled for the first time in days. Jake Morrison had become something of a legend since his first encounter with the Corvani. He'd been given command of one of humanity's newest heavy cruisers and had been fighting a running battle across 3 systems. "Good to hear from you, Jake. Please tell me you have good news." "Afraid not, Amy. We just lost the Saratoga to a Corvani dreadnought. Same story as always. Our weapons are useless, and their armor gets stronger every time we hit them." Amy watched more of her Marines retreat through the streets below. The Corvani weren't even chasing them anymore. They knew the humans couldn't hurt them. Dr. Hayes suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wait! Did Morrison say their armor gets stronger when we hit them?" "Yeah, so? What if that's the key? What if the organism feeds on conflict, on violence? What if it literally eats our attacks and uses them to grow stronger?" Amy stared at him. "What are you suggesting? That we don't fight back?" "I don't know yet, but maybe fighting them the way we've been fighting them is exactly what they want us to do." The radio exploded with chatter. The Corvani had reached the medical center. Amy could hear screaming in the background, and then sudden silence. "Major White, come in. Bill, do you copy?" Nothing but static. Amy looked out at the burning city below. Smoke rose from 100 fires, and she could see the dark shapes of Corvani warriors moving through the streets like they owned the place. Because they did own it now. Just like they owned every other world they'd taken. "Dr. Hayes," she said quietly, "whatever theory you're working on, work faster. Because if you don't find something soon, there won't be any humans left to save." The scientist nodded and went back to his tablet, frantically taking notes and studying video footage. Amy picked up her rifle and checked the ammunition. It wouldn't do any good against the Corvani, but it made her feel a little better. In the distance, she could hear more ships landing. More warriors coming to finish the job. Humanity's greatest weapons had failed completely. Their best soldiers were dead or running. And somewhere out there in space, thousands more Corvani ships were heading for Earth. The war had barely begun, and they were already losing. President Karen Wells stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Washington, D.C., looking at a holographic map of human space that showed nothing but bad news. Red markers indicated worlds that had fallen to the Corvani. There were 43 of them now, and more were being added every day. Madam President, we have to consider surrender, said Secretary of Defense Robert Craig. He was an old man who had seen too many wars, and his voice shook with exhaustion. They've given us terms. If we surrender now, they'll allow some humans to live as slaves. General Tom Bradley slammed his hand on the table. Like hell will surrender. We're humans, not cattle. There has to be a way to fight these bastards. With what? Craig shot back. We've thrown everything we have at them. Nuclear weapons, plasma cannons, kinetic bombardment, chemical weapons. Nothing works. Their armor adapts to everything we hit them with. Karen looked at the faces around the table. These were the best and brightest leaders humanity had, and they all looked defeated. All except General Bradley, whose eyes still burned with determination. General, give me your honest assessment, she said. Bradley stood up and walked to the holographic display. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from the colonial wars, and when he spoke, everyone listened. Madam President, I won't lie to you. Our conventional forces are useless against the Corvani, but we're not dead yet. We still have the Soul Defense Fleet, and we've been working on some new ideas. What kind of ideas? Unconventional warfare. If direct attacks don't work, maybe we need to try something different. Before Karen could ask what he meant, an aide rushed into the room carrying a tablet. Madam President, urge a report from Titan Station. Karen took the tablet and read quickly. Her face went pale. Titan Station has fallen. 40,000 civilians dead. The room went quiet. Titan Station had been one of their strongest defensive positions, with 3 full Marine divisions and the latest defensive technology. If it couldn't hold, nowhere could. There's something else, the aide said nervously. We have a report from Marine Sergeant Lisa Carter. She was one of the last to evacuate. She says she saw something strange. General Bradley looked up. What kind of strange? She says one of the Corvani warriors hesitated when he saw civilian children. His armor seemed to flicker or weaken somehow. Secretary Craig shook his head. Combat stress. People see things in battle that aren't really there. But Bradley was interested. Get me Sergeant Carter on a secure channel. I want to hear this myself. A few minutes later, Lisa Carter's face appeared on the main screen. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and tired eyes. Her uniform was torn and dirty, and there was a bandage on her left arm. Sergeant Carter, this is General Bradley. I want you to tell us exactly what you saw on Titan Station. Carter straightened up despite her exhaustion. Sir, it was during the evacuation of Residential Block C. We were moving families to the transport ships when a Corvani patrol found us. 3 warriors, sir. They started killing the adults, but when they got to the children... She paused, rubbing her eyes. Take your time, Sergeant. One of the children, a little girl maybe 6 years old, was crying over her mother's body. Just crying, sir, not fighting or running. And this Corvani warrior, he just stopped. He stood there looking at her for maybe 10 seconds. And I swear, sir, his armor looked different, like it was cracking or something. What happened next? The other warriors called to him, and whatever happened was over. He killed the child and moved on. But for those few seconds, something was wrong with his armor. General Bradley leaned forward. Sergeant, have you seen anything like this before? Maybe, sir. There have been a few times when the Corvani seemed to hesitate around unarmed civilians. Nothing as clear as what I saw with the little girl, but little delays, like they were confused or something. After Carter signed off, the room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Bradley spoke. I want every combat report from the last month analyzed. Look for any instances where Corvani behavior seemed unusual, especially around civilians. Tom, you can't be serious, Secretary Craig said. You're grasping at straws. Maybe, but straws are all we have right now. Karen stood up and walked a window. Outside, She could see the lights of Washington, D.C. In a few weeks, those lights might be going out forever. How long before they reach Earth? She asked. At their current rate of advance, 6 weeks, Bradley replied. Maybe less. And how many ships would they bring? Intelligence estimates at least 5,000 vessels. Probably more. Karen closed her eyes. Earth had maybe 300 ships that could fight, and they'd already proven useless against Corvani armor. It would be a massacre. There's something else, Madam President, Bradley continued. We're getting reports that the Corvani aren't just conquering our worlds. They're studying us, taking prisoners for experiments. They want to understand how humans work. Why? Unknown, but it suggests they see us as more than just another species to conquer. They're curious about something. An alarm started ringing in the Situation Room. The duty officer looked up from his console with wide eyes. Madam President, we're receiving a transmission from the Corvani fleet. They want to talk. Karen felt her heart pound. Put it through. The main screen filled with an image that made everyone in the room step back. The Corvani war commander was even more frightening than the reports had suggested. 8 feet tall, covered in that living armor, with red eyes that seemed to burn with hatred. Humans. The alien said in that harsh voice that sounded wrong coming through human speakers. I am War Commander Thexvar of the Corvani Empire. You have fought better than most species, but your resistance is pointless. Karen stepped forward. I am President Karen Wells of the United Earth Government. If you want to talk, we're willing to listen. The alien laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Talk? I am not here to talk, little human. I am here to inform you of your choices. Surrender now, and some of your people will be allowed to live as slaves. Continue to resist, and we will kill every human in the galaxy. We won't surrender, Karen said firmly. Humans don't give up. Humans are weak creatures who mistake stubbornness for strength. But you amuse us. No species has fought this long against the Corvani Empire. Most surrender after losing 3 worlds. You have lost 43 and still resist. The war commander leaned closer to the camera, his red eyes seeming to look directly at Karen. Tell me, President Wells, what makes humans think they are special? What makes you believe you can succeed where 47 other species have failed? Karen looked around the room at her advisors, then back at the alien on the screen. Because we're human, she said simply, and humans protect what they love. The war commander stared at her for a long moment, then laughed again. Love? You think love will stop our armor? You think love will turn aside our weapons? Foolish creature. Love is weakness, and weakness is death. The transmission ended, leaving the Situation Room in darkness, except for the red glow of the tactical displays. General Bradley was the first to speak. Well, at least now we know what we're fighting for. Karen nodded, looking out at the lights of her city again. In 6 weeks, the Corvani would be here. Their weapons were useless, their defenses had failed, and their enemies seemed unstoppable. But they were still human. And humans, as she had told the alien, protected what they loved, even if it killed them. Dr. Peter Hayes rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the computer screen for the 100th time that day. Around him, the research lab buzzed with activity as dozens of scientists work around the clock trying to find some weakness in the Corvani armor. So far, they had found nothing useful. Dr. Hayes, you should get some sleep, said his assistant, Dr. Jane Miller. You've been at this for 18 hours straight. Can't sleep? Peter muttered. Every hour I waste, more people die. On his screen were video files from every battle humanity had fought against the Corvani. Thousands of hours of footage showing human soldiers dying while their weapons bounced harmlessly off alien armor. But buried somewhere in all that death, Peter was sure there was an answer. A knock on the lab door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Frank Stone walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking as tired as Peter felt. Frank was a combat psychologist who normally helped soldiers deal with the stress of war. Now he was trying to understand how the aliens thought. Any luck? Frank asked, handing Peter one of the cups. Nothing concrete, but I keep seeing little things that don't make sense. Peter pulled up a video file from the Battle of New Austin. Look at this. Corvani warrior, killing human civilians. Standard behavior for them. The video showed one of the 8-foot aliens walking through a burning city, methodically killing anyone it found. Men, women, elderly people. It made no difference. The warrior moved with perfect efficiency. Now look at this, Peter said, switching to another file. This one was from Riverside Station. Same type of situation, but watch carefully. This video showed a Corvani warrior entering a damaged building. Inside were several human families hiding in the basement. The alien found them quickly and started killing the adults. But when it got to a group of children huddled in the corner, something strange happened. Did you see that? Peter asked. Frank leaned closer to the screen. See what? It killed them just like the others. Look again, frame by frame. Peter slowed the video down. For just a moment, maybe 2 seconds, the Corvani warrior had paused. Its weapon had been raised, ready to strike, but it hesitated. The hesitation was so brief that most people would miss it, but it was there. That's interesting, Frank said slowly. But maybe the alien was just checking for threats or something. Maybe, but I found 17 similar instances across 12 different battles. Always the same pattern. The warriors hesitate when facing unarmed civilians, especially children. Frank sat down and pulled out his own tablet. I've been analyzing the psychological profiles we've built on the Corvani. They're extremely aggressive, almost completely focused on violence and conquest. But there are some odd gaps in their behavior. What kind of gaps? Well, they never take prisoners for interrogation, but they do take some humans alive for what they call study. They don't seem to understand concepts like mercy or compassion, and they're fascinated by human emotional responses. Peter pulled up another video. This one is from Titan Station. Sergeant Carter's report. They watched as a Corvani warrior approached a young girl, crying over her dead mother. The alien raised his weapon, then stopped completely. For 10 full seconds, it just stood there. Its armor seemed to shimmer and change, becoming less solid somehow. Now that's definitely not normal behavior, Frank said. Look at how the other warriors react. The video showed 2 other Corvani calling to their companion. When he didn't respond immediately, they moved closer and seemed to be communicating with him. Whatever they said snapped him out of his trance, and he killed the child. It's like they had to remind him what he was supposed to be doing. Peter observed. Frank stood up and started pacing. Peter, what if the armor isn't just protective equipment? What if it's controlling them somehow? You mean like mind control? Think about it. You said the armor is alive, right? Some kind of symbiotic organism. What if it doesn't just protect the Corvani? What if it influences their behavior? Makes them more aggressive, more focused on violence? Peter stared at his colleague. And when they encounter something that doesn't trigger aggression, the armor gets confused. It doesn't know how to process nonviolent situations. They spent the next 6 hours going through every piece of footage they had, looking for patterns. What they found was disturbing and hopeful at the same time. The Corvani were most efficient when fighting armed opponents. Their armor worked perfectly, adapting to every weapon and strategy humanity could throw at them. But when they encountered unarmed humans, especially those showing strong emotions like grief or fear, their behavior became erratic. Here's another one, Frank said, pointing at his screen. Battle of Europa Station. Watch this warrior when he enters the hospital. The video showed a Corvani moving through a medical facility. When it encountered doctors and nurses who were trying to fight back, it killed them instantly. But when it reached the children's ward, something changed. The warrior moved more slowly, almost carefully. Its armor flickered and changed color several times. And look at this, Peter added, showing his own screen. New Melbourne, Civilian Evacuation Center. This warrior spent almost 5 minutes just standing in the middle of a group of refugees. They were singing some kind of song, trying to calm their children. In the video, hundreds of human families sat in a large room, waiting to be evacuated. When the Corvani warrior broke in, instead of running or fighting, they began singing together. It was a simple children's song, something about stars and dreams. The warrior stopped dead in its tracks. His armor is actually reacting, Frank said in amazement. Look at how it ripples and changes. It's like it can't decide what to do. What happened next? Other warriors arrived and snapped him out of it. But for those 5 minutes, he was completely inactive. Peter saved the file and leaned back in his chair. Frank, I think we're onto something. But I need to test a theory. What kind of test? We need to get this information to the field commanders. Have them try some experiments during the next battle. Frank looked worried. You want to use human soldiers as test subjects? They're dying anyway. At least let's give them a chance. Peter picked up a secure communication device and called General Bradley's office. When the general came on the line, Peter could hear explosions in the background. General, this is Dr. Hayes. I think we might have found something. It better be good. Doctor, we just lost another 3 worlds. Sir, we have evidence that the Corvani armor has trouble processing nonviolent situations. We think emotional displays, especially from civilians, might disrupt their system somehow. There was a long pause. Are you telling me we should try singing at them? I'm telling you that every conventional weapon we have makes their armor stronger. Maybe it's time to try something unconventional. Doctor, with all due respect, our Marines aren't trained to be therapists. Sir, Captain Morrison is fighting a running battle near Jupiter. Let me talk to him. If I'm right, this could change everything. Another pause. Fine. But Hayes, if this gets more of our people killed. I understand, sir. An hour later, Peter was on a secure channel with Captain Jake Morrison aboard the U.S. Defiance. Jake's ship had been fighting the Corvani for weeks, always retreating, always losing. Jake, I need you to try something that's going to sound crazy, Peter said. Doc, at this point, crazy might be our only option. What do you have in mind? Next time you engage the Corvani, I want you to broadcast something, not weapons fire or threats. Something emotional, music maybe, or messages from families. You want me to play music during a space battle? Jake, their armor adapts to every weapon we hit them with. But what if it can't adapt to emotions? What if the one thing their perfect defense system can't handle is the one thing that makes us human? Jake was quiet for a moment. In the background, Peter could hear the sounds of a ship preparing for battle. All right, document. We'll try it, but if this doesn't work. It has to work, Jake, because if it doesn't, we're all dead anyway. Nina Adams crouched in the ruins of what used to be Lincoln Elementary School, holding 3 terrified children close to her chest. The 8-year-old twins, Bobby and Sally, pressed against her sides, while 5-year-old Marcus buried his face in her shoulder. Outside, she could hear the heavy footsteps of Corvani warriors searching through the rubble of New Chicago. Nina had been a teacher for 15 years before the invasion. Now she was just another refugee trying to keep children alive in a world gone mad. When the Corvani had attacked New Chicago 3 days ago, she'd been leading a group of students to the evacuation ships. They hadn't made it. Are the monsters coming, Miss Adams? Whispered Sally, her blue eyes wide with fear. Sure, sweetheart. We have to be very quiet, Nina whispered back, even though she knew it probably didn't matter. The Corvani could track humans somehow. They always found everyone eventually. The footsteps got closer. Through a crack in the broken wall, Nina could see the dark shape of a Corvani warrior moving to the playground. It was 8 feet of living nightmare, covered in that horrible armor that seemed to move and breathe on its own. Red lights glowed where its eyes should be, and its weapons looked like they were grown rather than made. Bobby started to cry softly. Nina pulled him closer and began to hum very quietly, the same lullaby she used to sing to her own daughter before the war took her too. It was an old song her grandmother had taught her, about a mother's love watching over her children like the stars. The Corvani warrior stopped walking. Nina's heart pounded as the alien turned toward their hiding spot. It had heard them. This was the end. She'd seen what these monsters did to children, and she couldn't let that happen to Bobby, Sally, and Marcus. The warrior approached their hiding place, its armor making strange clicking sounds. Nina could see it clearly now through the crack in the wall. But something was wrong. The alien had stopped moving. It was just standing there, its head tilted to one side, like it was listening to something. Without thinking, Nina began to sing the lullaby out loud, very softly. Her voice shook with terror, but she kept singing because she didn't know what else to do. Hush now, my baby. Close your tired eyes. The stars are all watching from darkened skies. Sleep now, my darling, till morning light. Mama will keep you safe through the night. The Corvani warrior took a step closer, then another, but it wasn't moving like the killing machine she'd seen before. It was moving slowly, carefully, like it was in some kind of trance. Nina kept singing, her voice getting a little stronger. The three children had stopped crying and were listening too. Even in their terror, the familiar words comforted them. Dream now of sunshine and flowers so bright, of laughter and joy in the warm sunlight. Know that you're loved more than stars in the sky. Sleep now, my sweet one, with angels nearby. The warrior was right outside their hiding spot now. Through the crack, Nina could see its armor clearly, and what she saw made her gasp in amazement. The armor was changing, not adapting to weapons like in the battle reports, but actually breaking down. Cracks appeared across its surface, and pieces began to fall off like old paint. The red lights in the alien's eyes flickered and dimmed. Nina kept singing, her voice now clear and strong. She didn't understand what was happening, but somehow her lullaby was hurting this creature that no human weapon could touch. Love is the light that will show you the way. Love is the warmth that will brighten each day. Nothing can harm you when love is your shield. To love's gentle power, all darkness must yield. The Corvani warrior staggered backward. More pieces of armor fell away, revealing pale, almost human-like skin underneath. The alien raised its hands to its head and made a sound Nina had never heard before, a sound of pain and confusion. The creature underneath the armor was nothing like the monsters from the war reports. It was tall and thin, with large eyes that looked scared rather than angry. Without the armor, it looked almost fragile. Nina finished her song and waited. The alien, no, she realized it was more like a person now, looked at her through the crack in the wall. For a moment, their eyes met. There was no hatred there, no desire to kill, just confusion and something that might have been sadness. Then alarms began blaring in the distance. Other Corvani warriors were calling out in their harsh language. The alien person in front of Nina looked around in panic, then at the pieces of armor scattered on the ground. Nina understood. Without the armor, this being was defenseless. The other Corvani would probably kill it for losing its protective shell. "Hide!" Nina whispered. "Get away from here." The alien looked at her again, and she thought she saw gratitude in his eyes. Then it picked up what pieces of armor it could carry and ran away into the ruins of the city. Nina held the children close as the sounds of the other Corvani warriors got closer. But something had changed. She had seen the truth behind their armor. These weren't unstoppable monsters. They were people, trapped inside living shells that made them into killers. "Miss Adams," Bobby whispered, "how did you make the monster go away?" Nina thought about how to answer that. "I don't think it was really a monster, sweetheart. I think it was just someone who forgot how to be kind. And your song helped to remember? Maybe. Sometimes when people are hurt or scared, music can help them remember better things." Sally looked up at her with those wide blue eyes. "Will you sing to all the monsters, Miss Adams? So they'll remember how to be nice." Nina smiled, even though tears were running down her face. "I don't know if it works on all of them, sweetie, but I'll try." They stayed hidden for the rest of the day. When rescue ships finally arrived to evacuate the survivors, Nina made sure to tell the soldiers exactly what she had seen. At first, they didn't believe her. Then she sang the lullaby for them, and they recorded it. Within hours, the recording was being transmitted to every human military unit in the galaxy. Scientists analyzed her story, and Dr. Peter Hayes called her personally to ask questions. "Miss Adams," the scientist said over the video link, "you may have just saved the human race. We always assumed the armor was just advanced technology. We never considered that it might be controlling the Corvani rather than protecting them." "What does that mean?" Nina asked. "It means that underneath all that armor, they might be just as human as we are. And if that's true, then maybe we don't have to destroy them. Maybe we can free them." Nina looked at the three children sleeping on cots nearby. They'd survived another day because of an old lullaby and the power of a mother's love. Maybe that was what made humans special. Not their weapons or their technology, but their ability to love even their enemies. "Dr. Hayes," she said, "I want to help. If my song can break their armor, then I want to sing it for every Corvani warrior in the galaxy." The scientist smiled. "Miss Adams, I think that's exactly what we're going to do." General Tom Bradley stood in the war room, looking at faces that showed hope for the first time in months. Around the table sat President Wells, Dr. Hayes, Dr. Stone, and a dozen other military and civilian leaders. On the main screen was a recording of Nina Adams singing her lullaby, and next to it, footage of Corvani armor literally falling apart. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bradley said, "what you're seeing changes everything. Miss Adams has shown us that the Corvani aren't invincible monsters. They're prisoners inside their own armor." Dr. Hayes stood up and activated his presentation. "We spent the last week analyzing every detail of Nina's encounter. The armor isn't just protecting the Corvani, it's controlling them. It feeds on aggression and violence, but it can't process genuine emotion. When exposed to pure human compassion, it breaks down completely." President Wells leaned forward. "How sure are we about this?" "Very sure, Madam President. We've tested it 3 more times with volunteer refugees. Each time, the results were the same. Human emotional expression, especially music and expressions of love, causes immediate armor failure." Dr. Stone added his analysis. "The psychological implications are staggering. The Corvani we've been fighting aren't evil conquerors. They're slaves. The armor forces them to act aggressive and violent. Without it, they're probably peaceful beings just like us." General Bradley walked to the tactical display. "This gives us a new strategy. I'm calling it Operation Mirror. Instead of fighting the armor with weapons, we fight it with humanity itself." "What exactly does that mean?" asked Admiral Hayes. "It means we turn every human into a weapon against the armor. Not with guns or bombs, but with songs, stories, and expressions of love. We broadcast human emotion across every battlefield until their armor fails completely." President Wells looked skeptical. "Tom, you're asking our soldiers to sing at aliens who've been killing them for months. How do you think they'll react to that? Some will think we've lost our minds, but others will understand that this might be our only chance to win." A communication alert sounded. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen from a bridge of the U.S. Defiance. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation out here near Jupiter. 3 Corvani cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we surrender, same as always." Bradley smiled. "Perfect timing, Jake. We want you to test our new strategy." "The singing thing? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. We're transmitting a package of human emotional content to your ship right now. Music, poetry, messages from families to their loved ones. I want you to broadcast it all directly at the Corvani ships." Jake looked doubtful. "General, my crew is going to think I've snapped. Tell them they're trying something that might save a human race. If it doesn't work, you can go back to shooting at them." "All right, sir. Give us 10 minutes to set it up." While Jake prepared his ship, Dr. Hayes explained the science to the assembled leaders. The armor appears to be a symbiotic organism that evolved specifically to enhance warrior capabilities. It makes the host stronger, faster, and more aggressive, but it has a critical weakness. It can't process emotional states that don't involve conflict. "Why not?" asked President Wells. "Think of it like a computer virus scanner. It's designed to recognize and adapt to threats. But human emotions like love, compassion, and peaceful joy aren't threats in any conventional sense. The armor tries to process them and fails, causing systemic breakdown." The communication screen lit up again. Jake Morrison looked tense but determined. "We're ready, General. The Corvani are still demanding surrender. Should I respond?" "Yes. Tell them you want to share something with them first. Then begin the broadcast." Jake nodded and turned to his crew. "You heard the General. I know this sounds crazy, but we're going to try winning a battle with music instead of missiles. All hands, begin transmission of the humanity package." On the tactical display, they could see the 3 Corvani cruisers approaching Jake's ship. Normally, this would be a hopeless fight, The U.S. Defiance was powerful, but no match for 3 enemy vessels with adaptive armor. Then the broadcast began. The first thing transmitted was a recording of children singing in a school choir. Simple, innocent voices raised together in harmony. Next came messages that families had recorded for soldiers fighting in space, mothers telling their sons they loved them, fathers sharing memories with daughters, children drawing pictures for parents they might never see again. The effect on the Corvani ships was immediate and dramatic. General, Jake's voice came to with excitement. You need to see this. Their ships are changing. The tactical display showed the Corvani, cruisers beginning to drift. Their dark hulls, which had always pulsed with that living armor, were becoming lighter in color. Sections of their hulls were actually falling away, revealing different structures underneath. Keep broadcasting, Bradley ordered. The transmission continued with recorded poetry, music from around the world, and simple messages of hope and love. A recording of Nina Adams singing her lullaby played, followed by a symphony orchestra performing a piece about the beauty of sunrise. On the Corvani ships, more changes were happening. The aggressive, weapon-heavy designs were literally dissolving, revealing sleeker, more peaceful-looking vessels underneath. It was like watching butterflies emerge from cocoons. General, Jake reported, I'm getting communication requests from all 3 Corvani ships, but the voices sound different, less harsh. Put them through. A new voice came to the speakers, and everyone in the war room gasped. Instead of the harsh, grinding tone they'd grown used to, this voice was soft and musical, almost like singing. Human vessels, please respond. We are confused. Our minds are clearing for the first time in memory. What have you done to us? President Wells stepped forward. This is President Karen Wells of Earth. We've freed you from the armor that was controlling your minds. Controlling? Yes, I remember now. The armor made us angry, made us want to fight and kill. But underneath, we are not warriors. We were explorers and teachers and artists before the armor changed us. Dr. Hayes could barely contain his excitement. This is incredible. The Corvani civilization was peaceful before the armor infected them. The symbiotic organisms turned an entire species into unwilling conquerors. The alien voice continued, sadder now. We have done terrible things. Killed so many innocent people. How many worlds have we destroyed while trapped in our shells? 43 human worlds, President Wells said gently. But that wasn't really you doing the killing. That was the armor. We must make amends. But first, we must warn you. There are thousands of our ships heading for your home world. They are still trapped in their armor, still forced to be warriors. You must free them as you freed us. General Bradley leaned into the microphone. How do we reach them all? The armor communicates across vast distances. If you can create a large enough broadcast, strong enough and emotional enough, it might reach every Corvani ship in your system at once. Dr. Stone suddenly stood up. That's it. We don't need to fight each ship individually. We need to create a massive emotional broadcast that reaches everyone at once. What kind of broadcast? Asked President Wells. The story of humanity itself. Not just our wars and conflicts, but our art, our love, our dreams. Everything that makes us human. Bradley nodded slowly. We'll need every human in the solar system to participate. Every voice, every heart, every expression of what makes us who we are. The alien voice spoke again. Humans, we will help you. Those of us who are free will add our voices to yours. Together, we can break the armor's hold on our people. President Wells looked around the room at her advisors. For the first time since the war began, she saw genuine hope in their faces. Do it, she said. Send out the call to every human in the solar system. Tell them that our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our military. It's our humanity itself. As orders went out across human space, billions of people prepared to sing, to speak, to share their hearts with an enemy they now understood had never really been their enemy at all. Chris Parker had been a high school history teacher before the war. Now he was leading a group of 43 human survivors through the ruins of Detroit Colony, trying to stay one step ahead of the Corvani patrols. For 3 months, they'd been living in abandoned buildings, scavenging for food, and watching their friends die one by one. But everything changed when the message came through on emergency frequencies. President Wells herself was speaking to every human in the galaxy, explaining that the Corvani weren't really their enemies. The armor was controlling them, and human emotion could break that control. "She wants us to do what?" asked Maria Santos, a nurse who'd been treating their wounded with whatever medical supplies they could find. Chris held up the small radio they'd been using to monitor military communications. "She wants us to share our humanity with them. Tell them stories about who we are, what we care about. Show them that humans are more than just fighters." "That's insane," said Ben Coleman, a mechanic who'd lost his wife and 2 kids in the first attack. "These things kill my family. You want me to sing them a lullaby?" "Ben, what if your family wasn't killed by the Corvani? What if they were killed by the armor controlling the Corvani?" Ben's face got red with anger. "What's the difference? They're still dead. The difference is that maybe we can save other families by freeing the people trapped inside that armor." Helen Davis, who'd been quietly tending to a sick child, looked up. "I'll try it." Everyone turned to stare at the elderly nurse. Helen was 72 years old and had been taking care of people her entire life. Even in the middle of a war zone, she never stopped helping anyone who needed it. "Helen, you don't have to," Chris said. "Yes, I do. Last week, when the Corvani patrol found us in a hospital, I saw something strange. One of their warriors was wounded, had a big crack in his armor. I started treating his injury just like I would any patient, and he didn't stop me for a few minutes. He just sat there and let me clean and bandage his wound." "What happened?" "Other warriors came and took him away. But for those few minutes, he wasn't trying to kill me. He was just someone who was hurt and needed help." That night, Chris's group set up in an old-school building that reminded him of where he used to work. They'd heard that Corvani patrols came through this area regularly, and according to the new plan, that was exactly what they wanted. "Remember," Chris told the group, "we're not trying to fight them or hide from them. We're trying to reach the people trapped inside their armor." When the first Corvani patrol appeared at dawn, Chris's group was ready. Instead of running or hiding, they sat in the school's old auditorium and began sharing stories about their lives before the war. Mary Johnson, a mother of 3, talked about teaching her children to ride bicycles and the joy on their faces when they finally figured it out. Tom Bradley, a construction worker, described building his first house with his father and how proud he felt when they finished the roof. The 3 Corvani warriors who entered the building stopped immediately. Their armor began to shimmer and change, just like in the reports they'd heard from other worlds. Helen Davis approached the closest warrior, moving slowly and carefully. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Helen. I'm a nurse, and I help people when they're hurt." The warrior raised his weapon, but then hesitated. His armor flickered like a broken light. "I can see you're in pain," Helen continued. "That armor must be heavy and uncomfortable. Would you like to sit down and rest for a moment?" The warrior staggered and nearly fell. Helen caught his arm and gently helped him to a chair. As soon as she touched him with kindness instead of fear, his armor began cracking and falling away in large pieces. What is happening to me?" the being underneath asked in a voice full of confusion and fear. Without the armor, he looked almost human, just taller and thinner, with pale skin and large, gentle eyes. "You're being freed," Helen said, continuing to help remove pieces of the failing armor. "You don't have to be a warrior anymore." The other 2 warriors were also struggling as their armor responded to the emotional stories being shared around the room. Within an hour, all 3 were free, sitting with the human survivors and learning about compassion for the first time in their adult lives. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. The word had spread through resistance networks, refugee camps, and hidden communities. Humans everywhere were discovering that their greatest weapon against the Corvani wasn't violence. It was love. On New Melbourne, a group of children who'd been hiding in subway tunnels began singing songs their teachers had taught them before the invasion. Corvani patrols sent to hunt them down instead found themselves sitting in circles, listening to the music and remembering what it felt like to be peaceful. On Riverside Station, an elderly man named George Miller had been broadcasting messages on old radio equipment, telling stories about his 50-year marriage to his wife and how they built a life together based on kindness and mutual respect. Corvani ships in orbit began experiencing massive armor failures as their crews were exposed to his daily broadcasts. But the most dramatic change was happening with War Commander Thexvar himself. The leader of the Corvani invasion force had been growing increasingly frustrated as his warriors stopped responding to orders. Ships were going dark across his fleet, and the few reports he received spoke of armor failures and insubordination. Thexvar tried to counter the human strategy by ordering his remaining armored warriors to avoid all contact with human civilians. But this only made the armor more unstable. The symbiotic organisms needed regular exposure to conflict and violence to remain strong. When denied that, they began to weaken on their own. War Commander reported one of his few remaining armored lieutenants, "We're losing entire squadrons every day. The armor is failing across the fleet. Then we attack immediately," Thexvar snarled. "We destroy the human home world before they can contaminate more of our warriors." But even as he gave the order, Thexvar could feel his own armor beginning to respond to the constant broadcasts coming from human space. Stories of love, sacrifice, and compassion filled the communication channels, and no matter how hard he tried to block them out, some of the messages got through. The armor that had made him into the perfect warrior was starting to crack around the edges, and underneath it, buried under decades of forced aggression, something that might have been his original personality was beginning to stir. On Earth, President Wells and General Bradley were monitoring the reports from across human space. "It's working," Bradley said with amazement. "We're getting confirmation from 17 different worlds. The Corvani are surrendering in large numbers. Not surrendering to be defeated, surrendering to be freed. How many ships are still heading for Earth? Maybe half the original fleet. The rest have either been freed or have stopped responding to orders entirely." Dr. Hayes joined them with his latest analysis. "The psychological impact is spreading faster than we hoped. The freed Corvani are communicating with their still armored companions, telling them what it feels like to be free. It's creating a cascade effect." President Wells looked out at the approaching enemy fleet on the tactical display. It was still massive, still dangerous. But for the first time since the war began, she believed they might actually win. "Send a message to every human on Earth," she ordered. "Tomorrow we make our final stand, not with weapons or shields, but with everything that makes us human." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking out at the largest space battle in human history. But it wasn't like any battle that had ever been fought before. Instead of weapons firing and ships exploding, the space around Earth was filled with something far more powerful: the combined voices of humanity itself. Every human on Earth was participating in what President Wells had called the final broadcast. From the great cities to the smallest towns, from space stations to mining colonies, 4 billion human voices were sharing their stories, their hopes, their love for each other and for life itself. "Jake," came Dr. Hayes' voice over the communication system, "are you seeing this on your sensors?" Jake looked at his tactical display and shook his head in amazement. The massive Corvani dreadnought, the flagship of War Commander Thexvar's fleet, was changing right before his eyes. The dark, aggressive hull was becoming lighter, sections of living armor falling away like old skin. "I see it," document. "The whole enemy fleet is transforming." Across Earth's solar system, the same thing was happening to hundreds of Corvani ships. The broadcast wasn't just music or poetry this time. It was a story of humanity itself. People were sharing memories of their first love, describing the feeling of holding a newborn child, talking about the beauty of the sunset or the comfort of a friend's hug during difficult times. Children in schools were reading letters they'd written to the aliens, explaining that they weren't angry at them and hoped they could be friends someday. Elderly people shared wisdom learned over decades of life, speaking about forgiveness and the importance of choosing love over hate. Artists displayed their paintings and sculptures. Musicians played every style of music humans had ever created, and writers read poetry about hope, dreams, and the wonder of being alive in a universe full of possibilities. On the Corvani flagship, War Commander Thexvar was experiencing something he hadn't felt since childhood. The complete breakdown of his armor's control. The symbiotic organism that had shaped his thoughts and emotions for 50 years was dissolving, unable to process the overwhelming tide of human compassion flooding his ship's communication systems. "Commander!" One of his bridge officers gasped, his own armor cracking and falling away. "I remember now. I remember who I was before the armor. I was a teacher. I taught young ones about the stars and the beauty of the universe." Thexvar tried to maintain control, but his own memories were surfacing. He remembered being a young explorer, fascinated by alien cultures and eager to learn from them. The armor had taken all of that away, turning him into a weapon of conquest and destruction. "Sir!" came another voice, this one from a communications officer whose armor had completely failed. "We're receiving a direct message from a human leader. She wants to speak with you personally." On the main screen, President Karen Wells appeared. She looked tired but determined, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle rather than triumphant. "War Commander Thexvar, my name is Karen Wells. I'm the leader of the human people you've been fighting." Thexvar tried to respond with his usual harsh threats, but the words wouldn't come. His armor was failing rapidly now, and with it, the artificial aggression had imposed on his mind. "I know you're confused right now," President Wells continued. "The armor that's been controlling you is breaking down, and you're remembering who you really are. We don't want to destroy you or your people. We want to help free you, just like we've freed thousands of your warriors across the galaxy. You're showing us mercy?" Thexvar managed to say, his voice already sounding different as the armor's influence faded. "After everything we have done to your people, because of everything you've done to our people, we understand what it's like to suffer, and we don't want you to suffer anymore." Around the bridge, more of Thexvar's officers were being freed from their armor. Instead of the 8-foot-tall warriors they had appeared to be, they were revealed as beings not so different from humans, intelligent, curious, and naturally peaceful. "Commander," said his former weapons officer, now speaking in the musical voice of his true species, "I can hear our people on other ships. They're waking up too, remembering who we were before the armor changed us." Dr. Hayes' voice came through the communication system. "War Commander, we've learned that your armor is a parasitic organism that feeds on conflict and violence. It's been controlling your entire civilization for generations, turning you into unwilling conquerors. But you don't have to be controlled anymore." Thexvar felt the last pieces of his armor falling away. Underneath, he was tall and thin like the others, with pale blue skin and large eyes that had forgotten how to see beauty until now. For the first time in decades, his mind was completely his own. "How many worlds," he asked quietly, "how many innocent peoples did we destroy while trapped in those shells?" 47 civilizations, President Wells said. "But that wasn't you doing the destroying. That was the armor using you as tools." "The armor made us forget," said another Free Corvani officer. "Made us think conquest was our nature, that violence was the only way to interact with other species. But I remember now, we were explorers and scientists. We wanted to learn from other cultures, not destroy them." Captain Morrison watched as the transformation spread throughout the enemy fleet. Ship after ship was shedding its aggressive, weapon-heavy design, revealing sleeker, more elegant vessels underneath. The Corvani had been natural explorers and teachers, turned into warriors against their will. "President Wells," Thexvar said, and his voice was now fully his own, musical and sad, "we have committed terrible crimes against your people and others. How can we ever make amends?" "By helping us free the rest of your people," she replied. "There are still Corvani ships across the galaxy, still trapped in their armor. Together, we can reach them and break them free." Dr. Hayes added, "We've also learned that the armor organisms can be completely removed with the right treatment. We can help your people recover physically as well as mentally." Over the next several hours, the greatest space fleet in galactic history peacefully surrendered, not in defeat, but in gratitude. As each ship was freed from the armor's influence, its crew began working with human scientists to develop better ways to free their remaining people. The Corvani, it turned out, had originally been a peaceful confederation of worlds dedicated to exploration and learning. They had been infected by the armor organisms centuries ago, when they investigated a derelict alien ship. The parasites had gradually taken control of their entire civilization, turning them into the galaxy's most feared conquerors. We spent generations believing we were naturally superior warriors, Thexvar explained to President Wells during their first face-to-face meeting. The armor convinced us that conquest was our destiny, that other species were meant to serve us. But that was never who we really were. 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the same school on New Chicago where Nina Adams had first discovered the armor's weakness. The building had been rebuilt, and Nina was teaching again. But now her classroom had both human and Corvani children, all learning together. "Captain Morrison," Nina called out, "would you like to hear what the children have been working on?" The mixed class of human and young Corvani stood up and began singing together. Not Nina's lullaby, but a new song they created about friendship and understanding between different peoples. Their voices blended beautifully, human and alien harmonies, creating something neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Hayes joined Jake in the back of the classroom. "The last of the armor organisms were destroyed yesterday," he reported. "Every Corvani in the galaxy is now free. And the other species they conquered? The Corvani are helping them rebuild. It turns out they remember everything they did while controlled by the armor, and they're determined to make amends. They're using their advanced technology to help restore damaged worlds and bring back extinct civilizations." Jake watched the children singing and thought about his brother Alex, killed in the first Corvani attack. The beings who had killed him were gone now. Not dead, but freed from the control that had made them into killers. In their place were people who deeply regretted what they'd been forced to do and were working every day to heal the damage. "You know what the strangest part is?" Jake said to Dr. Hayes. "What's that?" "We won the greatest war in human history without firing a single shot in the final battle. We won by being human." Dr. Hayes nodded. The armor was designed to adapt to any physical threat, any weapon or strategy, but it had no defense against compassion, love, and the simple act of treating enemies like people who deserve kindness. In the classroom, the children finished their song, and Nina began the day's lesson. A history class about how two very different species had learned to understand each other and become friends. It was a story that would be told for generations, about the day humanity discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons, but their ability to love even those who had hurt them. The war was over, not because one side had defeated the other, but because both sides had remembered what it meant to be truly alive.